to a special edition, but of course they're all special, aren't they? Of the Yard Sign. Thank you so much for joining us. Whenever, wherever you may be listening, watching this program. Johnny Torres, your host as always. Thank you so much for subscribing. Again, you can find the audio version of this podcast on all of your favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like the video version to see our ugly mugs today, you can, if you're not already, watching this on Facebook or YouTube. And thank you so much for everybody that does watch. And please be sure to like, share, helps get the show out there, helps promote the candidates, and of course the vision that we have not only for this program but for our state, for our country. And as always, thank you for your support of the Yard Sign. I didn't even prepare for the show today because not only was I incredibly excited about who we're having on, but I feel like I don't need to prepare for our guest today because we've been close friends for a long time. Yep. It's been incredibly exciting to watch, all the things that he's been involved in. And certainly now that, I would say throughout life, we have our peaks and valleys. Yeah. And I think right now you're like on a peak, and it's so exciting to watch. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun to kind of live vicariously through what you're doing. But joining me today is State Representative from Florida District 69, and that is Danny Alvarez.
Thank you, Johnny.
I would go Daniel, but it's so clunky and it feels
looking
weird.
For my dad. Like, where is he?
So exciting to be able to, again, kind of have this conversation in a different light. Because, gosh, I think the last time we had you, I don't think you were even a candidate back then.
I don't think so.
And now, I mean, both of our lives have, just changed dramatically since then. And I want to dig into, because it's one of those things that unless you have the relationship that you and I have, sure, the people that are going to come on this show are not going to say the things or talk about the things that you and I can talk about. Sure. Obviously, we're not going to go too crazy along with this show. We are kind of on a tight schedule, fortunately, for our audience. But let's go ahead and start with, for those who don't know, let's not get into the political career yet. Sure. Let's talk a little bit about your personal background.
Can we talk about ours real quick before I get there?
Sure, go for it.
I'm so proud of you, man.
Oh, thanks, man.
This is incredible. And you talk about the peaks and valleys. Yeah. It has been incredible to watch the evolution of Johnny Torres, right? It's not just the voice and the very handsome man. He is like this life that is ever expanding. And so when I walked in here today, folks, if you don't know this, I'd been here before and I've seen all the iterations of studios and iterations of opportunities you've done. This is awesome.
Studios or lack thereof.
I didn't say that. Or lack thereof.
Yeah, right.
But honestly, it's been awesome. So I'm very proud of you.
Thanks, man.
You've been doing great stuff.
And as they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. And, here it's all blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, but isn't that true? So the truth is, I think that's one of the big problems that we have today is that we all are so Insta ready for everything that we think it's in 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. Well, you didn't build this in 10 seconds. Right. And good political careers or good business careers get built over time, right? Yeah. So we want it right now, but reality is we got to put in the work, and you've definitely put in the work.
Well, one of my favorite stories, touching on that very thing, I think one of my favorite examples right now of exactly what you just said is the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, right? Mike McDaniels. Yep. Who, I'm a Dolphins fan, so of course, it's just, it goes right to my heart. But the fact that he started out as a ball boy. Right. And even before that, he was just a kid in the neighborhood in Denver who would go to spring trainings and hang out to get autographs. And then by mere, a number of circumstances that we don't need to get into, he becomes a ball boy for the Denver Broncos and slowly works his way up through the NFL.
I didn't know that.
And had all kinds of peaks and valleys, as well. He had his ups and downs. But now, he's one of the most popular head coaches in the NFL, one of the most successful.
This is the guy who looks like Mark Anthony?
Yes. And I've said that from day one. Thank you.
Every time I see it, I feel like I hear, I need to know every time I see him,
Who knew Mark Anthony was so talented at football?
He's a football player and he's a singer.
Yeah. But in Miami, I think maybe culturally, maybe in some kind of weird way, gravitates to people like that.
Yeah, sure.
Of course. Look at Eric Spoelstra. Coming up from the film room in the Miami Heat. Mm-hmm. And again, these are two guys that never played the sport professionally and are now, Eric Spoelstra, obviously proven to be one of the greatest NBA coaches of all time. And now Mike McDaniels proving to be, at least this season, an incredible NFL coach.
Yeah, so it just goes to the heart where oftentimes it's really not your background, but it's your heart, right?
Yeah.
It's your will. And that's kind of, as we raise our children, that I'm trying to instill in all of mine. And, you know, you can have all the talent in the world and it's wasted on someone that doesn't have the heart, doesn't have the will.
Yeah.
I can teach you skill. That's what I tell them all the time. I can teach you skill. I can never teach you will. And, you know, like we grew up poor.
Or that success is not a straight line.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And sometimes that line goes way down before it comes way up.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really a hard lesson, especially when you're watching your kids, right? You watch your kids and you're like, oh, I want to save them from the down line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you're not. You know, you want to. So, like Tony, he's in college now, right? Like, and
your oldest?
My oldest son is in college now. And people are like, hey, you going to help him get into college? Absolutely not. Hey, zero. I didn't lift a finger. You know why? Because he's got to show me what he wants. It's his life. It's his story, right? I lived my life. I've made my story. I'm making it now. And I was thinking this, like you and I grew up poor. When we were coming up in Miami, we grew up poor, right?
Yeah.
And I think that hunger to not be poor, to take advantage of the things that my parents couldn't take advantage of.
Because we're both first generation Americans.
First generation, right?
Yeah.
So you take that story, and that's my story. But then you look at my son. His dad's a lawyer. His mom's an accountant. Kid half the time grew up on Davis Island. You know what I mean? How do I teach that cat the will? You know, how do I teach him
that desire,
the empathy? How do I teach him his manners? You know, so it took, in my mind, a lot of obsessive thinking about pouring that into him. So I would take him to every board meeting I was in, anytime we did any charitable work, anytime we did, he was always like a shadow. Like we'd make him see it so that he could see what it was like to grow up around men, what's it like around, you know, people that are good, people that are bad, you know what I mean? So he could see the difference. So it was important.
Well, and I think for me, it was growing up, going to visit family in Colombia over the summers.
Oh,
and you see real poverty.
That's it.
Because again, we're the 1% of the world.
Right.
Our homeless wouldn't even be considered homeless in other countries. No. I mean, you know, there's somebody that says, you know, that, you know, we're the only country with fat homeless people.
Sure.
You know, and I mean, it's a terrible joke, but it does lend itself to the fact that we have an abundance of everything here in this country. And if someone needs help, there's help there for them. And in other countries, that's not the fact. I remember as a kid being in a taxi or being in a car and seeing other kids my age on the streets working in construction sites, selling candy, cigarettes, or just begging for money.
Yep.
And to see that firsthand really makes you appreciate not only what your parents went through to get you here, but also the opportunities that we all have, just given the freedoms that we have.
Yeah, and that's why I don't take any of this for granted. Yeah. You know, like that's why for you know, I was having a conversation today. For me, this role as a state rep is very personal. You know, like this is not just like a guy who's like, oh, let's go get elected.
Yeah,
this is the culmination of like everything we fought to get here. You know, if my grandfather could see me now, I honestly, if I could get a Wayback Machine and go back in time and be like, abuelo, look at what we're doing. A guy who had a 6th grade education brought us over to America only because like his country got taken over and they were trying to kill him, right?
Wow.
So when we talk about escaping to freedom, it's a literal, it's not a figure of speech. It's a literal thing that happened for us. We shouldn't even be Americans. We should be Cuban. You know what I mean? We should be celebrating and protecting our own land.
Yeah.
And this is my land. You know what I mean? So I always tell people this, I got nowhere to run. And I don't run very well. You know, after I got out of the Army, I'm like, I'm done running.
You jump out of planes.
I do jump out of planes, but I will not run to wherever you want me to.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is worth fighting for. And with all of our problems, Johnny, with all of our problems in our society, we're founded on such goodness that hope of goodness, or even of returning to it, is worth every moment you're away from your kids, every time you're fighting for something, every time someone makes fun of you, or, you know, online or in the media or whatever. It is what it is, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's worth fighting for.
Well, one of the things that has always impressed me about you is that you've really taken advantage of really everything that's been, you know, presented to you.
Sure.
You know, not only, you know, you're an attorney, you know, but you're also incredibly entrepreneurial. You know, I know that, you know, a number of projects that you've invested in or are invested in, that sort of thing over time. But then you also balance that out really well. And I have no idea how, with again, continuing to serve your community. Because aside from going to Tallahassee and, doing, what you're doing now, before then, you were always involved in community organizations. You're involved with the PBA, and you were at the sheriff's office for a period of time. There's always been this really fascinating balance that I've noticed about you between being the capitalist, entrepreneurial, like out there, that kind of guy, but then also making sure that you're balancing that out with giving back to the community.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. But for me, it was like one of those things where, like when you try to find what you do well, like it takes a long time. Remember, we just started this conversation with, it takes time. So I'll turn 50 this year, which is incredible to say. And now in my 50 years, I can look back and I know what drives me, right? And money doesn't drive me.
Yeah.
So it's almost like this when you have an ability, and I feel like I have the ability. We've tried it. We've done and made money. We've employed people. We've created businesses. Yeah. That's not what moves me. My brother who makes money, he looks at me and he goes, "You're an idiot. You're like what a waste of talent."
Right.
And I get it, but that just isn't what fires me up.
No, because you could basically stick yourself in an office, for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and probably make ridiculous sums of money. But again, I mean, it's if it's not a motivator, then what's the point?
So we started talking about our kids, right? And so when I got asked to do this job, because this was not on my radar, and we can talk about it later, but it was not on my radar. When I got asked to do this, I was like, I'm not doing that, because in my mind I was like, man, I'm wasting all my years, and waste is the wrong word, because I enjoyed the thrill and what I got from giving back to the community and helping. That was my fire, but it's what fired me up. So as we're considering this, I talked to my kids, because it's going to take time from them. You know what I mean? It's totally, and they all looked at me like I was an idiot. They're like, "What? Of course you're doing this." And I was like, "No, I'm not doing this." Like they asked me this. This is like the third time I got asked to do it. Like seriously,
sure.
Not like, "Hey, would you consider?" Like, no, we want you to.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, again, almost as long as I've known you, there's been people asking you to run for office.
Yeah, and so my kids go, "Dad, this is literally what you taught us." And I was like, "Oh my God, did my 12-year-old told me that?" She says, she's like, "Bobby, look, we understand that it's a sacrifice, but you can make a difference for other people, and that's what you taught us." And I was like, "Oh my God, please don't cry in front of your 12-year-old daughter." Because if I got nothing else, like if this political career gives me nothing else, that conversation, I was on cloud 9. And all my other kids are like, "Yeah, duh." Like,
right.
They then went back to whatever they were doing because it was like a done conversation.
Sure.
I'm like, no, let's keep talking about it. And then Tony, the old one, he goes, "She's right." Like, what? She's right. So,
well, there's something. 3 of them agree.
Yeah, and when all 3 of them agree, and it's how they said that to me that truly mattered most. So for me, like doing this job is like other people are like, "Yeah, it's a lot of work." This ain't a lot of work. This is not. I mean, this is a lot of hours.
I mean, given your history as I know it, I mean, you know what work is. I know that you know what work is.
Yeah.
And I, having served under someone who was elected office, and you now being in elected office. It's fun, but it's not work.
Well, it's not work to me.
Right.
Do we have to go to a lot of places? Do we have to be is it a lot of timing? Is it a lot of scheduling? Is it a lot of hours away from home? Yeah, but I love it. And you know what my favorite part about being a rep is? Being the fixer. So like we've got people in the community, they got a problem, and they should never need to talk to their state rep in order to access their government and get the benefits of their government that they've already paid into. That is one of the jobs and the duties of their government. But I like being able to solve their problems, and I love that part. People are like, "Hey, you want to go to Congress?" Absolutely not.
It's incredibly empowering.
It is
because even as someone who served at the staff level, having the ability to say, "Yeah, you know what? Let me make a couple phone calls and fix that for you."
Absolutely.
It's just, I mean, you feel like a superhero.
Absolutely.
I mean, and the impact that you have on people's lives is immeasurable. And like we were just saying, you can't put a dollar figure on that.
You don't put a dollar on that.
No.
And then, and Johnny, like, my staff is 100% empowered. Like, they don't have to call me. Like, if there's a problem with a constituent, if I'm getting a call, that means it's bad, right?
Sure.
Because they went and threw my name around or my office to the whatever agency and they can't get where they need to go, then I'm in. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm in from the beginning. And I don't think like the government is bad per se. You know what I mean? It's just, it's the bureaucracy and the inefficiency built within human systems. You know what I mean? And sometimes you just need to push, and that's what we do. We'll push where we're supposed to and pull where we can. And then
and it's just not perfect, and nor will it ever be.
No,
because there are circumstances that can never be accounted for.
Yep, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
And again, it's you know, I dealt with a VA issue. You know, with someone from Citrus County, and the circumstances that led to this problem were so unique.
Right.
I mean, it was, and really it took a lot of hand-holding to get it resolved.
That's right.
And we finally got it resolved. But the system itself was not designed to handle something like that. So let's get into kind of, you know, now looking back.
Sure.
Going into it, you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed freshman state rep.
Right.
What was on your to-do list? Like, what was at the top of your to-do list? Like going in and saying, you know what, this is, I think, the first thing I'm going to tackle once I get up there. Okay.
Nothing.
All right.
And Johnny, to be honest with you, I get nervous when people go up there with like super strong agendas.
Sure.
Because they're either expanding government or making government stronger in areas that they shouldn't. I'm a big...
Well, and I always ask that question because the first campaign I ever volunteered on, now he didn't win, but he was a phenomenal, he would have been a phenomenal representative. The guy who beat him was, you know, equally as great a state representative. But his passion was autism because of his son.
Sure.
And so he wanted to go up there and create or eliminate, you know, bureaucracies, you know, to support, you know, the autism community.
Sure. And I jest when I say that, you know, about people that go up there with their agenda. Because Adam Anderson, a great friend of mine and teammate, he goes up there. You know, he lost his son, God bless him, and he had a genetic disorder. And because of Adam's passion, the state of Florida is now funding genetic research in order to prevent that from ever happening.
Wow!
And what a testament to, you know, his child. You
it's
know?
a legacy.
It is an absolute legacy, and so. I mean, you can move mountains if you want to, right? You can move mountains. So we just take that same passion into like everything that we do personally. For me, what really got me in this office, why I finally went from no to yes, it was COVID. I mean, and I'm not talking about like any COVID conspiracy. It was, as Americans, I believe fundamentally that, you know, we balance the group with the individual, and that's why we have the Bill of Rights, right? It is one of the greatest gifts our founders could have ever encapsulated. You know, our natural rights, they put them on a piece of paper and said, these are things the government can't take because they belong to you.
Correct.
During COVID, I saw us exchanging those rights for a false sense of security. And, and when I negotiated for the PBA, the Tampa Police Union, you know, when they were getting their mandatory vaccines, every piece of data that I had, which was, I almost treated it like a trial when we were negotiating.
Yeah.
I had data, and they're like, we don't need any more data. We're doing this. And I was like, oh, because you want to, right?
Sure.
And they thought it was their obligation and that they knew better than my cops about what to do with their lives.
Right.
And I said, and I called my dad that night, Johnny. I was like, Dad, listen, you grew up. He's like, relax, mijo. You know, I'm like, no. I said, you lived. You're the one with a gun in your face that got kicked out of your country. You're the one that escaped communism. For me, it's always been theory, right? Like, we lived with the stories of our grandparents that were escaping and my parents that were escaping in their tears. But for me, I lived in the comfort and security of an American youth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I said, Dad, I saw the enemy today. You know what I mean? And it didn't have a gun. It didn't have a green uniform. It came in a business suit telling me and the cops that I represented that they knew better about them and their rights than they did.
And even 3 years later, I don't think people truly realize how true of a statement that is.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we're forgetting very fast, aren't we?
Well, yeah, and I think especially as, you know, the voters trend younger, I think they've never witnessed directly, right? Because we've always had like Cuba to point at,
right? Sure.
And more recently, Venezuela to look at. But there were never the threat,
right?
You know, like our parents faced, you know, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, or with the USSR, or it was never a direct threat to us. And so, again, it's one of those things where you could tell them all day long, well, anywhere it's been implemented, it never works, but at the same time, they have, again, it's that young naivete, that there's some kind of utopia to be had. And the fact that they think that the government knows best.
That's right.
And it's just weird how generationally, how those tables have turned, because the people that are now trying to impose their will on its citizens are the people who 40, 50 years ago were fighting the government for imposing its will on, and
that's right.
It's just bizarre.
Well, that's what fear does, right? Fear will have you exchange your rights for security, and the truth is, once you do that, you never get it back. It becomes this precedent where you're like, well, we did it here, let's do it there. That's why it's this really bright, and you may call it an academic line, I call it a real line, right? Because we don't get rights back that we gave up. And history has always shown that when that happens, the outcome is always poor for the individual, right? And America, as strong of a group it's built on the back of an individual right. And so that's what made us different. We encapsulated them. That's what made us special. And that's why all these other countries copied us, you know what I mean? Like other countries now, it's standard to have individual rights too. It's, well, we led the charge, Right. So,
well, not to date the podcast here, but, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in Argentina.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a complete 180 in terms of what they've been living under now for probably a few generations, and to have a complete reversal of that. I mean, someone who, we hear certain candidates running for office here talk about gutting the government. This guy, day one, he's like, yep, this is going, this is going, this is going. And, and it seems like he's going to be able to pull it off.
Let's see.
I
only say let's see because once the people that are benefiting from the institution, right, whatever that institution might have been, are like, oh man, our cherry card's over.
Well, to that point where Republicans have always been of small government. Let's call it for what it is. We saw right after 9/11 what happened
under a massive expansion.
We saw under a Republican president, we saw the largest expansion to that point of government that we'd ever seen in a couple generations.
That's right.
So fast forwarding, so let's talk a little bit. What has been maybe, expectations versus reality, for you now that you've had a year in Tallahassee?
What's cool is so we're a super majority, right? So you go in there and you hear everyone like, oh, y'all railroad whatever you want. It's a republic. That is not how that works, right? There's a lot of internal checks and balances, so I like to go in, and when I'm new somewhere, I like to just kind of sit and watch. And that doesn't mean like I can just sit on my hands, because we have 7 bills we're going to run.
Yeah, and you've got committee assignments.
Yeah, we got committees and stuff. So it's super important, but it's important to watch how it works. And you'll see people like, we'll come up with an idea, and we won't call anybody out, but you have people with an idea, and you're like, oh, that's not going to work. And they try it anyways. They're like, well, we have a super majority. And they're like, no. Reality plus your constitution, they all have to mix up, and then you can proceed forward. And if that's a good idea, we'll go forward. So the fact that there is some sort of internal checks and balances, it wasn't like a surprise to me, but it's really, really good to see. There is a lot of debate about the constitutionality of things. When you read things in the media and you're like a civilian, like pre me being behind the curtain, I remember going, why would somebody file that?
Right.
Well, people file things all the time. That doesn't mean we're going to do anything about it. In fact, it might never even get a committee. You know what I mean? And even if it gets a committee, it'll die at committee if it's a really bad idea, right? So it's important to know that it isn't.
But there's lots of motivations behind that.
Sure.
Some of it's PR points.
100%.
Some of it's for some of it's for some fundraising. Just
signaling. Right. Yeah. So
well, and also the fact that the partisanship isn't as severe, I think, as one would believe.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't find that at the federal level. I would imagine it's probably, less the fact at the state level. Sure, there's some partisanship, when you really get down to the nitty gritty of certain bills or certain controversial issues, that sort of thing. But the partisanship isn't anywhere near at the level that you kind of feel there is in the public or on social media and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, so there's the social media world and the public world that you may need for your constituency, depending on what side of the aisle you're on and what got you there. So if if you're a loud ruck maker and that's your thing, okay. But when all the lights are off and the cameras are off, we all eat lunch together.
Right.
Right. And most people don't realize that at those lunches, we talk a lot. So we have a member dining area. Everyone's got to pay their money to be in there, and then you get fed. It's just easier because there's not a lot of places to leave in time.
Right.
So, and then we all sit together, and Democrats and Republicans, it's mutual respect. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great ideas that come from that side. There's a lot of great ideas that come from our side, you know. Right. And although we have a majority, it's not like, okay, we just ram through. We talk a lot of stuff out. There's a lot of respect, and I have a lot of respect for Democrats. I know there'll be people that are super right that might hear this and be like, Danny, what are you saying?
Yeah.
I live in the real world, and in the real world, I'm going to respect any man or woman that's serving their community by being a rep, and that the institution demands it, and my position is going to give it to them. Now,
yeah, and you don't know their life path, that got them to the place where they believe what they believe and why they want to champion the issues that they want to champion.
And listen, we all have a vote.
Yeah. Right.
And so I stand with, my vote is my voice.
Well, and again, like you and I consider ourselves conservative.
Sure.
I would say, by most standards.
Sure.
But we were also raised in Miami.
Sure.
And Miami at the time, I mean, some might say different today, but
yeah.
But Miami was very liberal, because of the melting pot that it is, because you have so many people from so many different countries and walks of life and all that kind of thing. And so a conservative from Miami is going to look very different than a conservative from Pensacola.
Sure. Way. You know what else makes them different is how secure they are.
Yeah.
So if you're in a plus 40 district and you're red plus 40, what that means, if you're listening, if you're 40 percentage points above, right, you're going to win every time.
You're untouchable.
You're
in
untouchable.
An election. Yeah.
And those people, they act different than a plus 3 Republican, right? So, for example, my district was, when the first go was plus 2, and we ended up winning plus 14, right?
Wow.
Now it's trending plus 5, and we know that the MPAs in that district lean more conservative than not. But you can't go crazy. You know what I mean? And the truth is, when you're in a place like the House of Representatives, at some point you're going to need everybody. Right. At some point. Right. So,
well, and that was going to be my point, because both at the federal level and at the state level and even at the local level, people tend to forget that at the end, you're going to need those votes.
Correct.
From the other side
at some point.
It's just fortunately, I think it's as I was saying the other day to our producer, it's a feature, not a flaw.
Yeah.
That
feature, not a flaw.
You need votes from the other side to get anything done.
Right.
Our system was designed for compromise. It wasn't designed for one party take all.
That's right.
And I think that's healthy, that's safe, because when we're not in power, which wasn't that long ago.
That's true.
Again, it creates a little bit of a safety net there.
Sure. And the thing is it's a basic, it's respect. Look, you and I, not you, whoever, or a Democrat on the other side, we may not always agree, right? But I'm going to respect you. I'm going to stand by my position, and you may be able to sway me on some things, and I may be able to sway you. That has actually happened, right?
Sure.
So I'll give you an example. We had a bill that we were passing on making it available to give the death penalty to child rapists. Okay, to me that was like a slam dunk.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like, you touch a kid, I don't give a dang about you, right? So I'm listening to the debate, and I'm listening to the debate on the House floor, and my policy is, unless I'm going to add something that hasn't been added, I don't need to hear myself talk. Right, my vote is my vote. Right. Yeah. My voice. So I'm hearing some people like come against it, and I was like, is this real? Am I living in the real world? So I got a little fired up, and I made a little speech. And then after the speech, I had a couple people come up and go, "Hey man, you're totally right. I'm changing my vote." And on the record, they changed their vote.
Wow.
So there is room, right? But you can't get there without respect. Like, if you spit in the face of the person that, like, you're trying to move, well, where are you going to go? It's just leadership 101.
Well, one of the core kind of aspects of this podcast, from the days when there were 6 of us in a room, to even the days like today where there's 2 of us in a room. What I've always loved is that even though whether we've been all center right or there's been, someone maybe from the other side, like as part of the conversation, has been the varying degrees in how we differ in opinion. And sometimes even though we agree on something, it doesn't mean that we agree for the same reasons.
Absolutely.
And that's been always fascinating to me because, again, thanks to social media, unfortunately, we get I think just culturally or societally, it's just our nature to try to put people in boxes and be put in boxes. But again, that's not the case. We vary in our views, again, to every degree, as we were saying earlier, just based on how we were raised, where we were raised, that sort of thing.
Johnny, I got elected to represent District 69, not District 69 Republicans, not District 69 conservatives, not District 69 Democrats, the people of District 69, right? So I'm always weary of politicians that are very afraid to engage with people that disagree with them. And in the poison pill of American politics is the echo chamber of the same people talking to themselves and agreeing. My biggest fear in any room is to be the smartest person in that room, because if not, then I've given up the ability to learn, and I always need to be learning, and it's just my nature, and I want it, right? And then of always just hearing the same opinions over and over again. And that's the biggest, the algorithms in Instagram and Facebook, we know that's what they do. They just send you the same data over and over again.
They want to create that echo chamber.
They do want it. And that's literally on any path, whether it's a Democrat path or Republican path, it is not an American path, right? So I need to know, you don't agree with me? Why don't you agree with me? That's weird. I thought I was right. Yeah. Well, I still think I'm right, but it's good to hear that opinion. But truthfully, that's becoming more and more rare. Like, so these I think it was like Mothers Against Guns, or I forget the name of the group, and no disrespect. They come up to me and they're like, we voted against you, but we'd like to talk to you about our position on guns. And I said, yes, ma'am, of course. When would you like to meet? The entire group looks at me like, because they were ready for me to say, no, I don't ever want to talk to you about it because I'm a gun guy. I believe in guns. I believe in the Second Amendment, right? And they're like, you'll talk to us? I said, ma'am, that is the office of the people of District 69. Come talk to me. Yeah. And we've had great. It's funny because now when I see them in the hallways, they're like, "Hey, Danny." Well, they're respectful. They're like, "Hey, Representative," but they're respectful. And
no, look, and I remember from when I was serving Senator Rubio's office. Literally, the first week I was on the job, I went to like a Democrat mixer, like uninvited. Of course you uninvited, did, uninvited. But it was like 2 blocks away from the office. Sure. I'm like, let me go check this thing out, and see what's going on, and the response that I got was nearly the complete opposite of what I was expecting. Sure. I was expecting some like, should you be here or that sort of thing. No, it was like, hey, we're so glad you're here. Thank you so much for coming. Like it was very welcoming and embracing. And even there were times where people like hated him. Sure. And I'm his representative. And so they were going to vent on me because they weren't going to, have a chance to meet him. And, and after they got it all off their chest, they appreciated the fact that I respected their time. That's it. And that I heard them out, and that I was also willing to help them with whatever their issue was.
Listen, look at a man or a woman in the eye, tell them the truth, listen to them out of respect, right? Because that's what our job is. And we don't have to agree, right? We're just not going to yell at each other. We're not going to berate each other. I'm not going to let you berate me or anybody that I love. Right. But we're going to move forward, and I'm going to listen. And we may find a more mutual ground than you were expecting, just like you did with that, but we never know if we don't talk. Yeah. Right. So there you go.
So fast forward, you've already had some, I think a special session. Oh yeah. Have you done committees yet? Committee week? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So now, you've kind of got your legs underneath you. You know the hallways. Yep. Somewhat, because I've never been in a more confusing building than the Capitol building. Absolutely. But what's it like year 2? I mean, coming in, knowing the lay of the land, knowing how the games are played, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the first year, like I told you, like I'm just absorbing, and I'm an active person, so don't think I'm just like sitting on my hand. But we're absorbing. Year 2,
anybody who knows you know that's an understatement.
I got promoted. Awesome. I am in mid freshman year. I got promoted to become a whip, and I only say that because it is such an honor. It is.
Well, explain what that is.
So.
Because a lot of us, I think the average person doesn't truly follow closely enough to understand what that means.
Okay, so you want to know what a rookie sounds like when you get promoted and you're like, oh, really? What do I do with that? And so a whip's job is really to go and not tell you how to vote, but to make sure you understand the issues, and you're part of the leadership team. Overall, you're part of the leadership team. So it's an incredible tip of the hat to this leadership team that would honor me and trust me enough to, at my second, session period, not my second term, second session, give me this opportunity to kind of like lead and show that. To me, that's a big deal. So now,
and you're doing that on both sides.
And of course, I'm doing it on both sides. So at this point, you're like, oh wow, now there's even extra pressure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Last year, Johnny, just so you have a perspective, from the time I got elected to the time we were done with session, I was home in Hillsborough County 3 weeks. I mean, like 3 weeks during the week. We'd come home on the weekends to see the kids. That's a non-negotiable. But 3 weeks at home, period.
Right.
So I'm talking from November through the beginning of May. This time, we've already had 2 weeks in November, 1 week in October, 1 week in September. We're about to go into another week for our final 2 weeks before we go to session. So it's just a lot of time. It's a lot. We ran 8 bills last year. 6 of them got signed.
Wow.
And I didn't know that was a big deal until and I'm sorry if I'm getting off my numbers wrong. I think it's 6. I didn't know that was a big deal until the speaker says, Danny, how many bills did you get passed? I said, well, sir, I think it's 5. 5 out of my original 7. And he goes, Guy, if you would have gotten 1, I would have said, great job. And you know how you were talking about the inefficiency of government, of lawmaking? Well, we want that to be inefficient so that we don't have, bloat in all these like laws that we don't need. So that's why he was saying that.
Do they still have the rule where you're allotted, I guess?
7.
Okay.
So I'm allowed 7 bills.
Okay.
And then senators are allowed unlimited. There's 40 of them. There's 120 of us.
But then is there that rule, and this, again, forgive me because this was under the Scott administration, but it was like if you repeal the law, then you got like a bonus
was that what
you could present.
Oh, that's neat. So that must have been one of like what maybe the speaker at the
probably,
time? Yeah. No, that's not.
I think it was a Corcoran thing.
Yeah, I don't think that goes on right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it was like, well, if you had a law, if you presented a bill to repeal a law, then you were actually given like another slot to present a bill.
Absolutely. So that's part of my frustration. Like 7 is not enough,
Yeah.
Because it's not about like expanding law. It's about kind of fixing it so that it's right. People think you pass a law and then you got it right. No way. Like you pass a law because you have an idea. This isn't this thing should be done. Well, when you do the thing, you realize, oh man, we got this piece wrong. We got to go in and fix it. Well, that's
the unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's one of your 7 slots, right? So you could run all 7 of your slots fixing other laws in place, right? And then there's still issues that have to be worked on left and right. So that's one of the things that is most. And
I saw, I'm sure it's mostly because of your district. For people who aren't familiar with the area, your district is not entirely rural, but it's not suburban either.
It's a great mix of both.
Yeah.
It's got Fishhawk, it's got Riverview, it's got parts of Brandon. It's got a lot of rural, a lot of cattle, a lot of strawberries. And then, do
you have any Plant City or?
No, we go right up to the edge where Alderman Ford Park is. So, Keysville, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Places where most people don't even know where in Hillsborough County are. I got Fort Lonesome.
If it wasn't because I took my daughter at the horse camp out there, I wouldn't know where Keysville is either.
So, and that's how those folks liked it. You know what I mean? Right. But unfortunately, our
growth is coming.
A statement that is too true in Hillsborough County is the last thing a strawberry farmer is going to plant is a development, right? Is a house. Mm-hmm. We're just not keeping a lot of kids in agriculture. It's not sexy. It's hard work.
I didn't even know that was a thing, and that I'm sure it was probably the same for you. I didn't even know that you could study agriculture in high school until I moved here.
Yeah.
And saw high schools that had AAFs.
FFA.
FFA, sorry.
No.
So that had FFA. Like, I didn't even know what FFA was.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, kids like present like pigs and stuff at the fair and like things like that. Like, all that was so foreign to me until I moved here. Yeah. Because in Miami, we weren't exposed to that.
No, we weren't.
Like, where would you find a farm in Miami? Like
Davy. So do you remember like
but that was like horses. I mean, it's like that's about as country as you got.
But Miami used to be a cattle town. Miami was a cattle town. Oranges, cattle.
Yep.
Remember the Grahams? They were
Bob
a
Graham.
cattle family out of Hillsborough. I mean, well,
that was the thing. Like, Miami Lake still has cattle.
Correct.
You know, they're more for window dressing these days.
Yeah.
I mean, they just sit there and eat grass all day. I mean, but they're not. But it's more of the mascot thing than it is, you know, actual.
But once you cross the Redlands. Yeah. Like that's farm country 101, and it's such a juxtaposition. You're like, bam, bam, like development, and then boom, farmland. You know, so protecting farmland is ultra important, and especially guys like you and me that didn't grow up in it. It makes more sense to me than I think, because it's obvious to them. It's obvious to the farmer, but if we don't protect our farming and we don't protect and invest in those that do it, we're going to starve. It's not a it's not a joke. Yeah, it's not a what if. It will happen, and we got to stop it. If not, we'll
and that's a real economy. Because as we can't be entirely dependent on the tourism economy.
No.
And even still, we're not. I mean, thank goodness we're not. You know, obviously we have our ports and we have, you know, a lot, you know, more to offer, but I don't know the numbers, but I know that agriculture, and it surprises a lot of people when they find out how much of a cattle state we are.
We are the greatest cattle state. Most people don't understand that. We are one of the largest cattle states in the union. In fact, we have the largest cattle ranch in the country outside of Orlando. Wow. And most people don't know that. So what we do in Florida is cow, calf. What we do is we raise calves, and then right at a certain time, we ship them out west so they can get fed up, and they go to slaughter. So we breed them here, and we ship them there. So the cattle is huge. It's so big for our economy, right? And as cities grow, we encroach on their land, and then people complain, well, it smells. It's loud.
Right.
We're up all night when we're taking, you know, when the cows are being separated from their cat. Oh, bro.
Well, and it's funny because the minute it's gone, then you miss it. You know, my sister lives in Ruskin, which is predominantly agricultural up until recently.
Super tomato.
Where it's exploding, you know, with development. And the lot next to her community was recently purchased, and it's already been leveled and cleared, and and those cows, you know, I mean, it was kind of nice, you know, you felt like you were outside of the city, and now those cows, that land, that's all, you know. Look, let me give you an example. It's just going to be another 200 homes going in.
Let me give you another example. Strawberries impact Hillsborough County to the tune of $1 billion. That's a billion with a B, okay? Yeah. And every year we lose land, right? Because, you know, imagine trying to motivate your kid to go work hard in the field and farm. It's hard work. It's not sexy. So
even with as much technology as we have, and they're very. I mean, there's still a lot of farms. There are farms that are very technologically forward.
Sure,
you know, but it's still hard work at the end of the day.
The University of Florida is literally cutting edge. We have IFAS here in Hillsborough County. Yeah. They're using AI. They're using robots. They're doing everything they can to make it as easy and profitable for someone in a day and age when strawberries and fruits coming from Central and South America, which are not regulated, pesticide, no labor controls, any of that stuff, that's one of our greatest enemies. I'm telling you, like, our need to have a cheap banana from South America is really destroying the American farm. But you and me, two non-farm boys, we were like, I just want a banana. You know what I mean? But it is destroying America, and you may not even realize it. So, you know, because I have so much ag in my district, protecting ag is a super priority, super priority. And it becomes a state of Florida security issue. During COVID, like for example,
when commerce stopped.
Right. Smithfield Farms is the largest pork producer in the nation, got bought by the Chinese. Guess where they sent pork? Right? When we needed it, when supplies were low and costs were already high, our already low supplies went to China. And so could you fathom being dependent on our foreign countries or enemies for our food.
Well, you were talking about the lack of safety regulations when it comes to our food. And I just remember growing up all the time that you would hear that, oh, X food product, has this poison in it or has this thing in it. And, and again, a lot of it was coming from other countries or China specifically. I mean, remember the lead in the toys. And,
that's right.
And again, they've undermined our regulations time and time again. And
that's
even
right.
to today, I mean, the distrust that there is today between the United States and China, a lot of that stems over years of them failing to adhere to our regulations, our standards, and we're not even as strict as most of Europe.
No, listen, but between us and China, it is even much more than that. Like for you try to do business in China, there's no protections, there's no there's no intellectual property protections. It's more than that. They are actively working against the United States all the time. Right now in the Bahamas, they have over 3,000 people at their consulate. How many people do they need for an island the size of Nassau, right?
Yeah.
That's their largest manned consulate. Why? Because it's actually their spy base and their jump-off base to surveil us.
Yeah.
They just bought a deal with Cuba to create an electronic eavesdropping that they can eavesdrop all over the eastern seaboard from Cuba. They also have a jungle.
The Russians were doing.
Yeah, they now have a jungle school that they teach their military to train out of Cuba. So, Florida versus China, you think, man, listen, that's a national issue. It's not a national issue. It is a very real Florida issue. And remember, I'm a citizen of the state of Florida, which is the country of Florida, and we've got to defend it as well.
Yeah.
We passed the law that said no Chinese national can buy ag property, and we were actually the 26th state to do that, and we weren't leading on that. We should have led on that.
Yeah.
And we did it, and once we passed it, the Biden administration said, hey, Chinese nationals have constitutional rights. I was like, I didn't know that. I forgot that class in law school, So they sued us to try to say that it was an unconstitutional law. So we also did, part of that bill was we were going to prevent Chinese nationals from buying any land within 20 miles of a military base in Florida.
Which they've been doing around the country.
Why are they doing it? For fun?
Yeah.
No. So to surveil and go against us, right?
And steal IP.
Listen,
which is another huge problem.
The Aegis missile system that is our forward-leaning technology got stolen from Los Alamos. Why? For how? Under the Clinton administration, Chinese spies infiltrated, stole it, and what do you think is on their ships now? Their version of our missile system, right? So that bill went from 20 miles, and the Democrats amended it down to 1. And before, I was like, what? And then, if it wasn't for Jay Collins helping us fight in the Senate when it went back to the Senate, we brought it back to 10. So it started at 20, went to 1, and now it's 10.
Which even, again, with today's technology, I mean, that's nothing.
So you can go
to something, but
you can go to Walmart, right? And anyone that's trained in electronics, eavesdropping, and surveillance can build with consumer available products an eavesdropping system that can surveil.
Well, and we know that they're building in these surveillance systems into the products into the electronics that they build for us.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's why they don't sell Huawei phones here in the United States.
Did you hear about the port of I think it was Port Everglades, or was it in Port Everglades? So when you buy gantries, okay, there's the people in Europe that make the gantries. Those are those big cranes that get the commercial boxes off of the ships onto land. Well, they bought them from China, and
Port Tampa.
And when they looked at them,
the big orange and white ones,
and when they looked at them, they had spyware to determine from China how many times that crane goes up and down. Now, you might be like, Danny, what are the Chinese doing looking at it? Well, listen, they're trying to figure out how much commerce comes in and out. Right. And then you develop a intel picture. When you get that piece of information, you pair it with another one, and you go, you know what? Tampa looks like a great target if we ever have to hit it. So we've been giving it by buying that, and then because they felt they really had no choice, they bought it and they found it, and it's just an example of how the Chinese aren't passive, they're active against us. And if you don't do something about it as your state government, then you're really sitting on your hands.
kind of to wrap up, and we could go twice as long.
I could go for hours with you.
I know. We definitely got to have you back, and hopefully we can check in with you from Tallahassee.
Sure, please.
Any specific goals going legislatively, going into session?
Sure, absolutely. Two huge ones. One is for the second year in a row, I'm filing the BI bill, which is the bodily injury bill, mandatory BI. Okay. Right now, state of Florida pays the highest insurance rates, even though we have the lowest levels of mandatory coverage when it comes to car insurance. We already have a home insurance crisis that allegedly we fixed. And I say allegedly because I can only rely on an insurance companies and people that are in that industry to tell me that what we did is going to work in 18 months.
Right. It takes a year or 2 years for us to figure whether or not it's working.
What I've told them is, trust me, we will go back to the table if that's not going to work. But when it comes to our cars, we know that the current system of the PIP no fault is filled with fraud, and that fraud is driving up the price on good people. So we're going to do this mandatory BI bill. I've got insurance companies buying into it. I've got the lawyers buying into it. You never say that in Tallahassee. Yeah. Those two are always like at each other all the time. And on this issue, we finally got them to come to the table. So I think this is the year we're going to pass that. Cool. And God willing, that brings down prices, or at a minimum, it stops them from going up. Yeah. So that's one. The other one for me, this one's personal. Lithia Pinecrest is a thorn in my district. And the minute I listen, I'm so frustrated. I didn't know. Call me because I'm a rookie.
Let me just tell you, and our producer knows this, that when I decided I was going to move to Eastern Hillsborough County, I was saying my only rule is we have to be west of 75. West of 75.
That's funny.
I was like, I don't care if it's a yard or 10 miles.
Sure.
But I will not go east of 75.
Well, I understand why, right? So Lithia Pinecrest has been the bane of East County for forever. Yeah. And they thought they were going to solve it with that penny tax that got ruled unconstitutional. And then we thought, well, we'll use that money to build it. It's getting so muddled again that I'm done. So I'm just filing my own appropriation, right? I'm filing $12 million this year. I already put it in for this year, 30 next year, and 30 the year. So we'll get a total of almost $70 million.
Yeah, because those who aren't from the area, I mean, basically it became an unintended artery.
Correct.
And the problem is that the growth, which some of it has been there for a long time, but there's really nowhere to go. Like there's nowhere to build a new road or a new artery.
So the easements cost money. Yeah. It is what it is. Right. But those people demand relief, and trust me, I'm tired of driving. You know what the best part about representing your district is when you live there and you work there and all that kind of stuff, and work out there and you shop there, is that your pain is my pain. I hate.
And I have a client of mine that shout out to Brian Boker and Boker's Corner.
Oh, I know him.
Right. Yeah. So he tracks all. Yeah. He's a new client of mine. He tracks all the growth that's happening, and it's only going to get worse.
I like that guy because he sheds the light on real issues and is not. I don't feel it like super partisan. He just brings attention to it, and that is what a journalist is supposed to do.
Yeah, he's just saying, "Hey, here's what's happening.
Hey, did you notice this?
You guys talk amongst yourselves.
You think that's a good idea? You know?
Right.
So for me, I was just exhausted. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is. We put $12 million in. I have great confidence that I'll be able to get that $12 million. And then the plan is 30 and 30. I've already talked to the people that are coming in. I've given them the heads up. That's the plan. They're like, that's very reasonable. They know it. And then let's just do something about it. After I get the money, there's no excuse. Let's expand that road. You know,
because then it's in the county's hands, right?
Then it is in the county's hands,
and then you just got to hope they stick to it.
Yeah, I get the money, you build it. Let's go.
Right. All right. Well, man, thank you so much.
Brother,
this has been awesome.
Thank you.
We could probably go for another 2 hours at least on this, but as I said, we'll definitely have you back. Best of luck up in Tallahassee. It's been too long, so let's make it another reunion very soon.
Very, very soon. We'll give you updates.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching the Yard Sign from wherever you may be doing so, listening to or watching. Again, don't forget to sign up for the audio version of our podcast, which you can find on all of your favorite podcast platforms. You can even ask Alexa or Siri to play the Yard Sign for you. And of course, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow us on Facebook and YouTube for the video version as well. Thank you again, Danny Alvarez, State Representative for District 69, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much. So long.